Hi, I'm Andy Cools from Live Sound Training. Today we're going to look at some ways of visualizing audio signals so we can better understand how to process them and combine them into our live sound mix. So let's start with a representation of a simple sound. This is a kick drum, represented on a vertical scale which roughly denotes frequency from low through the mid-range to high. The shape represents the fact that there's slightly more energy at the top and bottom of the sound than the middle, the wider parts corresponding to the chest-thudding thump and beta-defining click components of the sound. Typically, one of the first things we do to a kick drum sound is apply some EQ. On the right, you can see the same sound after some EQ has been applied. In this instance, the bottom end has been enhanced, while the top and upper mid have been slightly minimized. This represents the classic rock kick drum sound. But EQ isn't the only sound shaping tool at our disposal. Here's a representation of a snare drum, which has reasonably uniform sound energy ranging from the lower to upper mid-range areas. And here's the same snare after high-pass filter has been applied. The fade represents the way in which the lower frequency content is gradually reduced in level. And on the right we have the same original snare after compression has been applied. This has the effect of limiting both the dynamic range and the frequency content of the snare, producing a tight and punchy sound, although this can be at the expense of some of the finer detail. So now we have ways of representing various types of signal processing. Let's build a mix of the whole drum kit. Most mixes start with channel 1, and that usually means the kick drum, so here's our EQ'd kick drum. Being as we're now going to be combining multiple sounds, I've added a horizontal axis to show panning information from left to right. So let's add a snare drum, a rack tom, a floor tom, and some cymbals. Straight away we can see that it quickly starts to look very cluttered, particularly in the mid-range area. We've got multiple instruments producing sound energy at similar frequencies, which mask and obscure each other, making the mix sound messy with the lack of definition of the individual kit elements. So let's try that again, but this time applying some signal processing. So here's our EQ kick drum, but now I've applied a little compression to fatten it up slightly and even out the dynamic range. Here's our snare, which I have also compressed slightly, as well as applying a high-pass filter to trim the bottom end. And now the rack tom, to which I've added a slight high-pass filter and panned it to the right. This not only reflects the physical positioning of the drum within the kit, but it also moves it away from the center, so it's not fighting for attention with other kit elements. Likewise with the floor tom, which I've also high-passed slightly and panned to the left. Some people like to pan their toms wide so they move across the full width of the PA, but I've never been a fan of that approach. The only time a drum kit would sound like that is if you had your head right in the middle of it, and few people are brave enough to do that. I find it sounds much more natural to pan the individual drum kit elements to match what the audience sees. So now we just need to add our cymbals. This represents the overheads, which have been high-passed and panned wide to spread the cymbals across the full stereo field, thus giving the drum kit a natural sense of width while minimizing any low-frequency leakage from the other drums. We can now clearly see that with a little bit of intelligent processing, we've created space for each of the elements of the drum kit to be clearly heard while also working together as a whole. If we compare it side by side with the unprocessed audio, we can clearly see the difference. So I hope you've enjoyed this visual way of analysing mixing. If you visit our website, you can download a PDF version of this presentation which goes further into the mix with guitars and vocals. There's a link on the screen and in the information below. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe and check out our other videos. Thank you and goodbye.